Hello, this is the Stephen Herreid Show by Catholic Vote, and I'm Stephen Herreid. So last week, in the Irish Referendum over whether to keep the abortion ban in place in that nation, the devil won. This was another Soros-funded win for the ruling classes and their favorite tool, which is perhaps the greatest evil of our time, cultural Marxism, secular leftism, whatever you want to call it, the decayer of children, families, civilizing institutions, and just governance. Like I said, the devil, basically. And Ireland is a majority Catholic nation. So as it turns out, there is absolutely no correlation between being Christian and being any use against the great evils of our time. In the lead up to the referendum, we saw Catholic after famous Catholic endorse abortion, and as for Pope Francis, he didn't say anything about it one way or another. And after the abortion ban was lifted, prominent Catholic clergy in Ireland and elsewhere murmured appeasingly to the press about how the church should focus on other social justice issues besides abortion.
I would hope that those who advocate it and know try to ensure that the legislation that is passed allows for abortion which is rare, which is safe, and which is legal.
Pro-life isn't simply about birth and death. There are many other ways in which lives are at risk in Irish society.
Things aren't any better in the U.S. According to Pew polling, more Catholics are pro-abortion than anti-abortion. Same goes for gay marriage. And even under Obama, who directly confronted the religious liberty of nuns and Christian employers, Catholics reported being about evenly divided on the question of the size of government. Also, according to Pew, the vast majority of American Catholics do not believe that there are clear standards of right and wrong, but do report frequent feelings of spiritual peace and well-being. Give me a break. Like I said, there is zero correlation anymore between being Christian, or being Catholic anyway, and being any good. It's a hard pill to swallow, because you'd think that members of the one true faith could be held to a standard of, at least a little above utterly contemptible. It's more likely that the most notable characteristic of Western Christians is actually cowardice and a willingness to hand over the victims of the evils of our time to the enemy. This is especially true among Christians who are powerful or influential. From cardinals to bishops to pastors to celebrities. I'm not just talking about the Catholic hierarchy. I'm talking about the church, really widely speaking, just Christians in general. It reminds me of the song Johnny Cash sang about a boy named Sue. It's about a boy who's abandoned by his father right after being born. And he said, "Now I don't blame him 'cause he run and hid, but the meanest thing that he ever did was before he left, he went and named me Sue." Like the boy's worthless absentee father, many Christian leaders don't just leave us without any fatherly guidance, but they actively feminize us. They've made a name for the church as weak, effeminate, limp-wristed, compromising, submissive, above all, always non-judgmental, meek, and as the saying goes, so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good. This is a church named Sue. I think this is true of virtually every human rights issue. But when it comes to the pro-life issue, come on. It was a prominent Catholic who came up with the seamless garment argument that equates abortion with every other social justice issue in the left's playbook. And think about it. How many times have you heard a strong official condemnation of the alleged racism of a border enforcement advocate? Now, how many times have you heard an equally official and strong condemnation of a pro-abortion rhetorician, even if it's a Catholic? I can't think of any. The church named Sue started, a long time ago. I'm not sure when, but it's when Christianity was almost completely abducted and replaced with a counterfeit. A Christianity that is essentially just an ideology of weakness. In college, I remember reading some passages from some of the bad guys of the post-Enlightenment world, and I got in a lot of trouble with some fellow Catholics because I kept saying, these guys actually sound like they have a point. Particularly, Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote that Christianity as a religion is entirely spiritual, occupied solely with heavenly things. A Christian does his duties with profound indifference to the good or ill success of his cares. And provided he has nothing to reproach himself with, it matters little to him whether things go well or ill here on earth. Fighting back against powerful evildoers accords ill with Christian meekness, Rousseau wrote. And after all, in this vale of sorrows, what does it matter whether we are freemen or serfs? The essential thing is to get to heaven. Christianity preaches only servitude and dependence, according to Rousseau. Its spirit is so favorable to tyranny that it always profits by such a regime. True Christians are made to be slaves, and they know it and do not much mind. Friedrich Nietzsche similarly jeered at Christianity as a religion of pity, that suppresses and condemns every natural instinct we have towards self-preservation, courage, and manly virility. Now, Nietzsche's alternative was moral relativism and brutal egoism, but still, that critique, though, I mean, we can whine about these anti-Catholic authors and say, hey, yeah, but that's not true Christianity. Okay, but it sounds a lot like the Christianity I've heard preached from many pulpits all my life. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that if Nietzsche and Rousseau's anti-Catholic rants are caricatures of true Christianity, then a lot of the church today is a caricature of the true church, too. What they were talking about was the church named Sue. And it turns out the church named Sue makes the perfect doormat for the overarching evils of our time, which with the exception of radical Islam are basically all forms of cultural Marxism. And even jihadists have a friend in cultural Marxism, as it happens, because it weakens and decays the cultures and institutions they want to enslave. But that's for another time. As Courtney Kirchhoff of Louder with Crowder recently perfectly put it to me, cultural Marxism is the overarching ideology which values weakness so it may subvert it. Now, there's a whole other group, a group of very insightful but ultimately also useless Christians who despair. They despair because they know what's happened, but they accept the basic premise that they have to be led by these false shepherds who preach weakness. So they shout about the failure of leaders all the time, but instead of saying, hey, let's do the right thing, they say, hey, let's make our leaders do the right thing, and until our leaders are great, we can't actually make any progress. Like I said, I don't blame them, but I've reached the end of my patience. I'm not waiting anymore for cardinals and pastors and bishops and aristocrats and elites to turn the church around. And I don't think you should either. And don't you see, by grumblingly waiting for orders from on high, we're kind of acting out the weakness that we complain about. I mean, the whole point is that Christianity isn't really about weakness and quietly taking orders and never showing any signs of rebellion or strength or resolve. Here's the antidote to the church named Sue. Realizing that when we are weak by choice, those who are truly weak are the ones who suffer most. When we are useless and silent and submissive, we're not doing something holy. We're stepping conveniently out of the way just in time for the wicked to rush past us and victimize the poor. That's your takeaway. I repeat, when Christians are weak by choice, those who are truly weak are victimized. And that is damnable, cowardly, unmanly, and the opposite of Christianity. Effectively, followers of Christ who duck out at every sign of danger might as well be henchmen for Satan. Like the Apostle Judas, Christians like that are literally integral players in the plans to implement evil in this world. It's time to stop pretending that we are the poor and the suffering and the weak and the downtrodden and the disfigured and the children whom Christ came to comfort and save. Do you realize how pathetic that is? You and I, inheritors of the incredible wealth, comfort, and freedom of the United States, are not helpless and poor. In fact, if you're watching this right now on a computer or a phone and on American soil, I'm willing to bet you're better educated, richer, cleaner, more comfortable, more physically fit, healthier, with more access to media, generally more powerful than almost all of the masses of mankind throughout most of the past 2,000 years of human history. We need to get this through our heads. Christianity isn't for you, and Christ didn't come to serve you. He came for the vulnerable, and he came to enlist you to serve them too. To serve the weak, the sick, the poor, the endangered, people who don't have the kind of power that you and I have. So instead of sitting around crying like hungry baby birds waiting for Mama Church to bring us better nourishment, instead of going online and complaining every time a bishop or pastor disappoints us, we should be acting to the best of our own ability to serve and save the vulnerable. Because guess what? You're right. Many Christian leaders are reliably unreliable. They can never be relied on to take a meaningful and effective stand when it counts. We need to move forward with that assumption in mind. If Christian leaders lend a hand, great, it's gravy. But if they don't, it's not news anymore, and I'm tired of the whining. People in the church named Sue need to start saying this: I'm not waiting for Daddy to come home anymore. I'm a grown man. And like Johnny Cash's Boy Named Sue, I'll take the name that useless father figure left me and use it to my advantage. If Christian leaders have made a name for Christianity as wimpy and compromising and submissive, we should try to shock the world with a toughness that they never expected from Christians of all people. So work extra hard, make extra money, make extra time, donate that time and money to organizations that champion the endangered, the least of these brethren whom Christ commanded us to to treat as himself. The unborn, migrants being raped and killed by traffickers on the border, single mothers desperate for help at your local pregnancy center, minorities in the Middle East targeted for genocide, prisoners doing decades of time for nonviolent drug offenses, starving Yemenite children, the homeless. Start somewhere. If you don't like what a bishop is doing, don't donate to his cause. Find real allies from among your peers to advocate for these people. And instead of being distracted by disappointing leaders, adopt an attitude of ambivalent contempt for them. Look, I get it. A lot of people feel abandoned and not led well. But ultimately, complaining about the weakness of leaders, it's not cutting it. We should be living the strong, true Christian life regardless of our circumstances. And ultimately, it's going to be worth it. Beyond our wildest dreams, Christ himself promised it would be. And here's the icing on the cake. Acting unapologetically like true Christians is going to take the world by surprise. Nobody will see it coming. Put another way, they won't know what hit them. This has been the Stephen Herreid Show by Catholic Vote, the show that pumps up courageous people and makes nervous people nervouser. I'm your host, Stephen Herreid.